So the Springfield Armory Prodigy got started strong, meaning it lowered the price of a double stack 19 or 2011 style gun, but it had some bumps and bruises with their 5-inch guns being a little hit and miss, at least initially. Those problems seem to be largely corrected in late 2024. Fast forward to now, and there's a Prodigy Comp with a large port style compensator. A compensator so called because its rifling stops as the port opens up. So it does have a good expansion chamber, but it still has limited vertical surface to redirect gas up. So how well does the new Prodigy Comp work? Well, pretty brilliantly, actually. We'll get there with how it shoots next to the 5-inch Prodigy without the comp, but there is a couple hangups that you're going to want to be aware of with the gun. Welcome back to the channel. I'm David, and this is the Springfield Armory Prodigy Comp 4 1/4. But first, let me offer the dads in the audience this crisp high five and this. Have you ever wondered how you make an artichoke? You strangle it. So quickly, I've already done videos on the Prodigy when they first came out way back in the day. I still like the Prodigy. It is, in my opinion, one of the better values sort of in this sort of price point because it does have an awesome grip, a full-size optic plate system. And for the price point, that's a difficult thing to get. Usually at the price point type guns, you're stuck with an RMSC footprint. So touching on some of the generalities with the Prodigy, it is made in America. It uses metal injection molded small parts, or MIM small parts, as many people like to think. Most people aren't going to shoot the guns enough to really get to the point where the metal injection molded parts fail, but people like to know about that. The price point at the MSRP is $15.99. I did buy this gun from Shields. I paid $15.49, and then my buddy sent me an email about 3 days after I purchased it with a link to where it was on sale for closer to $1,200 on the internet. It's 9mm only and comes with a 17 and 20 round magazine. It ships with one optic plate on the Doctor footprint, which is a footprint that stopped being popular around the time we stopped wondering what the Fox says. And that's a bit of a bummer, but we'll get there. Other than the obvious big port at the front of the gun, the other big change from the original 4 1/4 Prodigy is the front night sight that the gun has. The fit on the gun is actually pretty good, especially amongst the price point guns. It probably has the best slide to frame fit of the production 2011 style pistols. The trigger pull weight would make a striker fire duty gun proud. I don't tell you what those are because YouTube is dumb and interprets things as hair triggers despite knowing nothing about firearms. The safety still has a bit of the downward wiggle, which is the same on my 4 1/4 non-comped gun. It has that same kind of wiggle down at the bottom, but generally speaking, the fit on everything but the safety, the slide to frame and barrel to slide lockup is all very, very good. Probably the best of the budget-oriented price point guns. And the grip with its sort of like Hellcat texture on it is actually fantastic. It stays put in your hand, but it's not too abrasive when you actually run your hand on it. So it's a really, really good texture. I would say the Prodigy fit is probably as good as you get up until about the Bull Armory price point where it tightens up significantly. As far as shooting is concerned, well, just look at it in slow motion. It's docile and serene, just happily running like a sewing machine, stitching up the target with 9mm holes. I shot it with a few different types of ammo, the Winchester NATO loads, some Nosler ASP 124 jacketed hollow points, as well as the Buffalo Creek 115s, who were graciously enough to support the channel with some ammo. The Buffalo Creek 115s are super soft shooting 115s and make this gun look absolutely silly. Just look at the brass dribble out the side of the gun. That's how you can visually understand that the port is working, by the ejection of the brass not going like 6 to 8 feet to the right, but maybe 3 to 4 feet to the right. There's a lot less energy on this slide, which means that I could probably lighten up on the recoil spring and get even better results if I wanted to. It is very, very pleasant to shoot, even easier to shoot than the original Prodigy in the 4 1/4 or even 5 inches. If you've not shot the 4 1/4 or 5-inch Prodigies for some reason, I'm not exactly sure how they do it, these guns are some of the softer shooting, especially for the budget price point guns. I think it might be due to the fact they have this kind of heavier slide, and the spring weights that they're using make the gun just feel very, very under control when you're shooting it. And I'll say that the 4 1/4 version reaches up to be as soft, if not softer, than the 5-inch version without the comp. The accuracy I observed with the Prodigy comp was good. It didn't blow my skirt up or anything like that, but it was the kind of accuracy you'd expect to get with a production gun, so it delivered on that front. As far as reliability is concerned, I only have about 500 rounds through the gun. I had 0 stoppages of any kind, despite the, less than athletic ejection of the brass. It never caused any sort of issues. Brass never rebounded off the optic. You can look at the hood of the optic, there's no brass marks on it. So it's throwing the brass where it's supposed to be. It's just not throwing it very far. The gun was mega tame, shooting at 25 yards. You can see me shooting at this plate at 25 yards, just almost disrespecting the trigger and the gun being super stable. I've got a pretty good grip, so I'm able to return the gun well. But even that said, this gun makes it very easy. But it's not all sunshine and lollipops. There are a few things that you're going to want to know about the gun. The first, and this is true of the original Prodigies, is they kept their 2-piece guide rod design. The 2-piece guide rod design, I haven't had issues with it on this gun, but I definitely had issues with it on this gun, which has over 1,000 rounds. 2-piece guide rod design means that you put a hex wrench into the guide rod while the gun is still put together, and you loosen the guide rod to remove it. Take the gun down just like a regular 1911, then finish unscrewing the guide rod to get the spring off the guide rod, and it's in 2 pieces. The problem with that is if you don't put it together just right and use just enough torque or whatever, the guide rod as you're shooting it, especially if you've gone longer times between cleanings, can work its way free and bind up the recoil spring, causing the slide to stop. 2-piece guide rods kind of suck. That all said, it's a super minor piece to change. And if this was going to be like my main range gun or competition gun for like IDPA carry optics, that would be the absolute first thing I would swap, is go to a full-length guide rod that does not have 2 pieces. Next is the plate that comes with the gun. The Dr. Footprint has almost no viable options, like really strong options that I'm aware of in 2024. There are options available, but generally they're, lower cost, older technology optics. Generally, folks are kind of moving away from that footprint design, which means you're going to have to buy another AOS plate. No big deal, right? They're like 130 bucks, and that's because they come with the rear sight. The AOS system itself is brilliant because there's a hook at the back of the slide that the plate hooks into, and then it just greatly stabilizes the plate. It is a really good plate design, possibly the best on the 2011s that are going. But that's an extra 130 bucks that you probably weren't expecting to spend. And finally, this is kind of annoying, is that Springfield Armory bucked the trend. Usually on a 1911 barrel, there is a little peekaboo slit right there on the side of the barrel that shows you the base of the brass case. Springfield abandoned that in favor of a little hole at the top of the barrel, which means it creates a nice sooty, gassy jet as the gun fires, sending it basically straight up in front of the optic, which means you're going to get soot and gas all over the lens of your optic pretty quickly. On a gun that is, proud of its ability to have an amazing optic system, it seems like a very strange choice, because you're going to be cleaning your optics lens every 200 to 300 rounds, because it deposits quite a bit on there. As far as rolls for the 4 1/4 version of the gun, I don't have the 5, and I'm not going to spend the $1,600 for the 5-inch gun. I think the 4 1/4 probably would be the move, because the slide is going to be lighter weight than the 5-inch slide, and because it is exhausting the gas pretty efficiently, honestly. It actually works pretty well. The lighter slide weight kind of moving back and forth is going to make the gun kind of more stable. If you can tune the recoil spring and figure out, the lower end of what's acceptable for the kind of ammo you're using, I think you would have a gun that performs really, really well, especially given the price point. As far as rolls that the gun can fit into, because the 4 1/4 is not a whole lot bigger than like a Glock 19 sort of size, it's bigger, but not a ton bigger. You could potentially carry it, since it's in the low 30-ounce kind of price point. It could be an IDPA competition gun if you slapped on the magwell, and there are starting to be Prodigy-specific accessories for these guns. EGW makes a magwell for these things. You could slap on a magwell and have a pretty solid competition gun. The trigger you can swap out the ignition kit for if you want. It's a few $100, and you would have a killer trigger. All in all, it's a super fun gun to shoot. I can easily forgive it for its flaws, because the gas on the optic, while not ideal, isn't that big a deal. It's not a big deal to swap out the guide rod. And as I said, there's loads of accessories for the Prodigies at this point. I'll probably end up doing a comparison video in the future, comparing the comped version of the Prodigy to the Bull Armory with the ports, the XC, and all that kind of stuff, like I like to do. Let me know your thoughts in the comments, what you'd like to see it compared to. And if you want to see my original video on the Prodigy, I still stand by it. I think the Prodigy is still a pretty awesome gun. My two versions at launch didn't have any issues, and this one was also purchased from Shield, so it's an off-the-rack version of the gun, and it's got over 1,000 rounds.